26%. That's where the Michael Jackson biopic currently sits on Rotten Tomatoes. For a film about the most famous entertainer in history, that number isn't just disappointing, it's a verdict. Critics across the board largely agree this film doesn't work. And the BBC didn't mince words, calling it a bland and barely competent daytime TV movie and predicting it will be one of the worst films of 2026. In the next few minutes, you'll see exactly why critics rejected it and why the most revealing detail isn't the performance or the score or even the reviews. It's what the film deliberately chose not to show. The film is called Michael. It stars Jafar Jackson, Michael Jackson's nephew, in his first major lead role. It was produced by the Jackson family. And it currently sits at roughly 26 to 27% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's not a polarizing score. That's not a film that divided critics down the middle. That's a film that critics, broadly and consistently, agree doesn't work. The BBC gave it 1 star. The review called it really, really bad. And the phrase daytime TV movie wasn't meant as a genre description, it was a judgment about ambition, or the lack of it. To understand why this film failed, you have to understand what it was trying to do and what it was trying to avoid. Jafar Jackson was handed one of the most difficult acting assignments in recent memory. Michael Jackson isn't just a famous person. At his peak, he was operating at a level of cultural saturation that almost no one in history has matched. The moonwalk, Thriller, the sequined glove. These aren't just cultural references, they are artifacts so deeply embedded in collective memory that any recreation risks looking like a tribute band rather than a portrait. That's the first structural problem. The second is who made the film. The Jackson family produced it. They chose a Jackson to play a Jackson. On paper, that's poetic. In practice, it creates a dynamic that biopics rarely survive. When the people closest to the subject control the story tends to protect rather than illuminate. The audience doesn't get the truth. They get the version the family wants preserved. That's not a criticism of Jafar personally. It's a structural problem, and it shapes everything that follows. Here's the detail that tells you everything about this film's intentions. Michael ends its narrative in the mid-1980s. That's peak Jackson. Thriller. The moonwalk. The world at his feet. It's the version of Michael Jackson that everyone agrees on. Ending there means the film never has to sit with the contradictions that define the second half of his public life. The allegations, the trials, the years of tabloid siege. A biopic that stops before the controversy isn't a biography. It's a tribute act. The supporting cast is legitimately impressive. Coleman Domingo, Nia Long, and Miles Teller playing Jackson's lawyer, John Branca. These are serious actors. Their presence signals that the project had real ambition at some point. But ambition and honesty aren't the same thing. You can hire an Oscar-caliber cast and still tell a sanitized story. And that's the core criticism running through nearly every review. The film mistakes recreation for storytelling. A great biopic asks why. Why did this person make these choices? What did success cost them? Michael, according to critics, never asks. It's too safe, too flat, too comfortable to generate any real feeling. When a film about one of the most electrifying performers who ever lived makes critics feel nothing, that's the real failure. The 26 to 27% score isn't just a bad grade for one film. It's a signal about what happens when legacy management replaces storytelling. The films that last, the biopics that actually change how you see a person, are the ones willing to show the subject at their worst. Critics have pointed to films like Control and I, Tonya, as examples of biopics that worked precisely because they were willing to go to uncomfortable places. Neither was made by the subject's family. That's probably not a coincidence. Michael was built by design to avoid the hard questions. And audiences and critics can always tell the difference. A film that protects its subject isn't really about its subject. It's about the image. And images, no matter how carefully maintained, don't make for great cinema. The story of why this film failed is, in the end, the story of what it refused to be. 26%. 1 star from the BBC. One of the worst films of 2026. Jafar Jackson was handed an impossible task. Play his uncle, for his family, in a film that ends before the story gets hard. The result, according to nearly every critic who has seen it, is a film that tells you almost nothing about the most famous entertainer in history. Great biopics survive because they're willing to ask uncomfortable questions. This one was built to avoid them. And that choice, made long before cameras rolled, is what the score reflects. If you want to go deeper on this story, the full article is on factstormhub.com. And if you're drawn to stories like this, where the real drama is in what gets left out, subscribe. We cover exactly that every week.